Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that even when something felt wrong, you still gave them the benefit of the doubt? It was 12:17 p.m. on a Thursday when I opened the lunchbox my wife had just dropped off. Still warm, neatly packed, chicken with rice garnished with herbs, a handwritten note taped to the lid. For my love. Take care of your body. At first glance it looked perfect, familiar, even comforting. But then the smell hit me, not overpowering but just wrong, sour, almost metallic. I paused, fork in hand, staring down at the food while something deep inside me stirred. I'm Daniel Ruiz. I'm 43 years old, a firefighter in Houston. I've seen a lot flames, blood lives saved and lost, but nothing ever prepared me for the slow, calculated threat I was about to uncover. In my own marriage. That afternoon, instead of eating, I did something else. I pressed record on my phone, and what followed revealed a truth I never wanted to believe. If you've ever ignored your instincts for the sake of love, stay with me. And if this story resonates, like, comment, and subscribe. Because some truths are too important to stay silent. My name is Daniel Ruiz. I've spent the last 19 years running into burning buildings, pulling strangers from wreckage, and witnessing more pain than most people see in a lifetime. But until recently, I never considered that danger could live quietly inside my own kitchen, smiling gentle and offering me lunch. I met Carla 7 years ago during a CPR certification seminar. She was radiant, not in a flashy way, but in that peaceful, grounded way that draws you in without trying. She had just opened a small, holistic health shop, selling teas and oils, and spoke with calm authority about natural healing. I admired that. After everything I'd seen in emergency response, the trauma, the pills, the tubes, her world felt like the antidote. Slow, purposeful, healing. We married within a year. I wasn't just in love with Carla, I believed in her. I believed she was one of the rare people who genuinely wanted to help others. For the first few years, we lived in sync. I worked long shifts at the station, and she kept our home humming with herbs, warm meals, and softly lit evenings. She packed lunches for me, made sure I had clean uniforms, sometimes slipped notes into my gear. Stay safe. I need you? It wasn't just love, it was partnership. We were each other's safe place. But something began to shift about 18 months ago. It started small. Carla began questioning the food at my station, asked me not to eat anything from the vending machine. Too processed, she said. She offered instead to prepare everything I ate. I agreed, thinking it came from care. Then the judgment crept in. She criticized my toothpaste, my shampoo, the detergent the department used. Everything became toxic in her eyes. Around the same time, she stopped sleeping beside me. At first, she said it was my snoring. Then, it was the EMF radiation from my work phone charging overnight. She moved into the guest room. I shrugged it off, assuming we were just adjusting to middle age in different ways. But the distance grew, our conversation shortened, her touch disappeared. She began spending more time online watching videos late into the night with headphones and whispering in forums filled with alternative medicine jargon and conspiracy-sounding theories. I'd come home and find her scribbling notes from some health podcast, writing down what herbs could cleanse emotional toxins. She talked less and lectured more. I still tried to connect. I'd ask her about her work offer to take her to dinner. She'd decline, said restaurants use seed oils, GMOs, microwaves. Our world shrank into our kitchen. She cooked everything I ate, drank strange teas herself, and began speaking as if she were above the world we both used to live in. She stopped asking about the firehouse, stopped kissing me goodbye. I kept telling myself it was a phase. But when she began taking over every aspect of my diet, refusing to let me grocery shop, insisting I eat only what she prepared, I felt something turn. Still, I didn't resist. I wanted to believe this was her way of loving me, that it came from concern. I had no idea what was really happening. I didn't see the shift in her gaze, the edge in her voice when I asked innocent questions. I missed the moment when care turned into control, and by the time I started paying attention, she had already learned how to hide poison beneath a smile. It was a quiet Monday when Carla first brought lunch to the station. I was surprised she rarely visited me at work. She texted, "Thought I'd drop by." "I made your favorite." I met her outside the station doors. She handed me the bag with a big smile and a long hug that felt off. A little too long, a little too scripted. She kissed my cheek and said, "Eat it while it's warm, Carino. It'll help with your energy." Inside, I opened the container. Chicken and quinoa with some kind of green sauce and sliced root vegetables I couldn't quite identify. It smelled different than her usual cooking, stronger, almost medicinal. But I was hungry and didn't want to seem ungrateful. Still, something held me back. I poked at the chicken. It looked slightly gray. Not raw, but not fresh either. One of the root vegetables had a slimy coating, and the green sauce had separated oily on top. I didn't eat it that day. I told her the crew brought pizza and thanked her anyway. She seemed disappointed, but not angry, just watchful. That became a pattern. Every few days she'd surprise me with food, always at odd times, always with the same warmth that felt more rehearsed than real, and always with the same instructions, eat it while it's warm. But what began to worry me more than the food was her gaze. Carla started watching me eat with strange intensity. At home, at work, even during a picnic, she planned for our anniversary in the backyard. She'd fix her eyes on me with this expectant expression, as if waiting for something to happen, like a scientist observing an experiment. Once, when I hesitated before biting into a salad, she asked, "Don't you trust me?" in a tone that sounded more like a challenge than a question. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing changes in myself. Headaches that came and went, waves of fatigue that hit me mid-morning, even when I'd slept fine. My stomach turned sour after certain meals. I thought it was the job, the stress, the smoke. But one night, after eating a soup, Carla insisted I finish because it was a healing broth. I spent hours in the bathroom, sweating, vomiting. My hands trembled. She rubbed my back and said softly, "It's your body releasing the bad stuff. You'll feel lighter tomorrow." The next day, she brought me a detox tea. "Drink all of it," she said. "It's bitter because it works." And I did, because I wanted to believe her. But deep down, something had changed. The woman who once left sticky notes in my lunch now delivered meals with the precision of a pharmacist and the detachment of a stranger. She never ate the same food she gave me. She always claimed she was fasting or doing a different protocol, and the food always smelled slightly off, not spoiled enough to be obvious, but not fresh, like something had passed its prime and been hidden behind spices. Then came the morning she woke me early, beaming. "I made you a special breakfast, packed it for your shift." I opened it later at the station, scrambled eggs, sliced mushrooms, and a strange herbal paste on toast. The eggs were green-tinted, the mushrooms smelled like wet wood, and the paste was grainy dark and bitter to the touch. That was the first time I didn't just throw it away. I took photos. I saved a sample in a sealed container and left it in my locker. Something wasn't right. That afternoon, she sent me a message. "How's your stomach feeling? That blend is supposed to reset your gut." I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at my phone for a long time, my heart pounding. This wasn't just obsession. This wasn't wellness. This was control layered under wellness talk, wrapped in concern, and quietly served at my table. And I was starting to suspect that love was no longer the ingredient Carla was feeding me. After that morning's breakfast eggs that looked like they'd been cooked in pond water, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was truly wrong. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. My body was telling me. My gut, my bones, even the back of my neck felt tight every time I ate something Carla made. But more than anything, it was her behavior that kept scraping at the edge of my instincts like a dull blade. She no longer asked how my day went. She only asked what I ate when I ate and how I felt afterward, not emotionally, physically, like I was a test subject. I started paying closer attention. I checked the fridge one evening when she was out. There, tucked in a labeled glass container at the back, was what looked like a batch of cooked chicken. A date written on the tape read, Sunday. But it was Thursday. The container had cloudy liquid at the bottom, a strange slick sheen on the meat, and a smell that made me flinch. Yet when I asked her about it later, she said, "I just cooked that today. Maybe your senses are dulling because of the smoke from work." I didn't argue, I just nodded. But my thoughts were racing. I checked the pantry next. Several jars had no labels, just brown powders, dried leaves, and thick extracts. One smelled like metal, another like moldy citrus. When I asked her once casually what they were, she said they were adaptogens and energy modifiers. She sounded like she was quoting from a blog post she'd memorized. Around this time, I started experiencing symptoms I couldn't write off anymore. Constant fatigue, unpredictable stomach cramps, night sweats, a strange metallic taste in my mouth after dinner. The station medic offered to run labs. I declined. I didn't want to admit, not even to myself, what I was starting to suspect, that I might be getting poisoned. The scariest part, I couldn't be sure if it was on purpose, or if she truly believed she was helping me. Then came a day that changed everything. I came home from shift early. Carla didn't hear me come in. From the hallway, I saw her at the dining table, blending something in a mortar-brown powder olive oil and what looked like crushed pills. She poured it into a small glass jar, labeled it Daniel Recovery Mix, and placed it in the fridge. I waited until she went upstairs for a shower. Then I took the jar and hid it in the trunk of my car. I didn't eat anything that night. I said I was too tired. She looked disappointed, but not surprised. Later, I checked my text history with her. Nearly every conversation from the past 6 months was about food health or supplements. Not one, "I miss you." Not one, "How are you?" Not even a single photo of us together in over a year. I scrolled back through old photos, Carla smiling arms around me, holding smoothies and salads. Then more recent ones, jars powders, tinctures. Always alone, always labeled. It was like she had replaced our relationship with a protocol. The final push came from something small. I was drinking water from my metal flask at work. I noticed the water tasted strange, slightly bitter earthy. I asked one of the guys to taste it. He made a face. "Did you put herbs in this or something I hadn't?" Carla had packed it. That night I placed a voice recorder app on my phone and set it to automatically record whenever we were in the kitchen together. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I had to know. I needed proof, not for the police, not yet. For myself. And what I heard later shook me. While we were cooking, I asked her casually, "What's in the new blend you gave me today?" She answered without hesitation, "Just a bit of valerian root, dried chicken liver, and some aged broth. Nothing that could hurt you. Just things to teach your body resilience. Teach my body resilience." That wasn't love. That was a philosophy. A mission. One I never agreed to. The cracks weren't just in the food. They were in her mind. And now, I was officially scared. Once I admitted to myself that this wasn't a coincidence or a misunderstanding, I knew I had to move carefully. Carla wasn't acting out of impulse. She was planning, measuring, calculating. And that meant I couldn't just confront her in the heat of suspicion. I needed to be calm, methodical. I needed to think like her. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I thanked her for the tea she packed in my bag. I complimented the mushroom stew she left in the fridge. But behind my smile, I was documenting everything. I took photos of the fridge contents, especially anything she labeled for Daniel. I started storing small samples of suspicious food in sealed containers and stashing them in my locker at the firehouse. I kept a second phone, one she didn't know about, strictly for recording. Every conversation in the kitchen, every strange remark she made about toxins or cleansing rituals, I saved. I backed up all the recordings to a cloud drive. I even sent a folder of the most concerning audio clips to my brother in Dallas with a simple message: "If anything happens to me, start here." The recordings became more unsettling by the day. She would casually describe food not as nourishment, but as medicine, sometimes even exposure therapy. In one conversation, she said, "Your immune system has been coddled by too much refrigeration. You need to learn how to handle real life again." When I asked her if that's why some of the meat she used smelled odd, she replied, "It's aged. It's intentional." Spoilage is Western paranoia. Spoilage is paranoia. I stayed quiet and nodded, but in my head I was memorizing every word. A few days later, she delivered another lunch to the station. This time it was different. She showed up unannounced, brought the container in person, and insisted I eat it on the spot. She sat down across from me in the break room, eyes fixed on me. "I made this just for you. It's meant to help with all that stress you've been holding in." I opened the lid slowly. Chicken again this time, with barley wilted greens and a thick herbal sauce. The smell made my stomach turn. Fermented almost sour-sweet, like something left in a closed jar too long. I stirred it gently with my fork, pretending to be interested. "What's in it?" She smiled wide. "Just some things to restore balance. A few herbs, some aged protein, a little vinegar. It's stronger than usual, but that's part of the process." I glanced over at my locker. My backup phone was already recording. I had left it there with the mic active as soon as she walked in. I leaned back and took a breath. "I'm going to eat it in a bit," I said. "Just need to make a quick call." I stepped outside, walked to the corner of the station, and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, an old friend from academy days, now a detective with the Houston PD. I didn't go into details, just told him I needed quiet advice about a possible domestic issue. Food tampering, ongoing. I'm not ready to file anything, I said, but I'm collecting evidence, and I don't know how far this goes. He paused, then said, "Start freezing portions. Get audio. Don't confront her yet. If she's crossing the line, we'll need proof she did it, knowingly." That night, Carla hummed as she cooked, a soft, tuneless sound I hadn't heard in months, as if she were content, peaceful. I watched her stir something dark and steaming on the stove. "It's ready," she said. "Tomorrow's lunch is going to be really special." The next morning, she packed it into a clean glass container and wrote in marker on the lid, "Daniel, strength." I placed the container in my bag, kissed her on the forehead, and walked out the door. I didn't eat it. I took it straight to the lab at the department's hazmat training unit, asked a friend to refrigerate it and help me process it under the radar. He looked at the food and raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this?" I just nodded. I need to know what she's feeding me. Because this wasn't love anymore. This was something else, something darker. And I wasn't going to wait for it to kill me. 2 days after I dropped off the lunch sample at the hazmat lab, my contact sent me a text. "We need to talk. Results are concerning." I met him that night after shift in the back lot behind the training center. He showed me the preliminary analysis, dangerous levels of bacterial overgrowth salmonella, and a blend of unregulated herbal compounds with high iron and purgative effects. If you'd eaten the full portion, he said you probably wouldn't have needed an ambulance, but you would have been seriously ill, dehydrated, weak, and repeating that over time. It adds up. I felt a wave of nausea not from the food, but from the confirmation of what I had been fearing for weeks. I thanked him and walked back to my truck in silence, gripping the doorframe before I got in. Now I had proof, but I needed more. I needed her voice, her intent, her reasoning, so I played it smart. The next morning, I texted Carla like nothing was wrong. "Lunch yesterday was powerful. Felt different? Let's talk more about your process. I want to understand it better." She called me immediately. Her voice sparkled with excitement. "I knew you'd feel it. I'm so glad you're open to the deeper work now. I suggested we have dinner together that night, just the two of us. I made sure to wear a smartwatch with voice memos ready and a backup recorder in my pocket. When she served me the food, something dark, bitter-smelling, with what looked like boiled root chunks, I asked questions. "So how does this work exactly?" I said, cutting into the meat. "You've never really explained the blends." Her eyes lit up. "It's about programming your immune system, building tolerance. Our bodies are too clean these days, weak. By introducing aged proteins and herbal modulators slowly, I'm helping your system evolve." "Like a cleanse?" I asked, keeping my tone curious. She nodded, pleased. "Exactly, but deeper. Think of it like spiritual exposure therapy. I sipped water to hide my shaking hands. Have you done this to me before? Carla didn't hesitate. Of course, for months now. I just didn't tell you because I knew you'd resist. But you've changed, Daniel. You're calmer. You're sleeping deeper. You're more grounded. The protocols are working. Working? I pushed the plate away slightly and leaned forward. Have you told anyone else about this? She shook her head. Only Julia, my sister. She's been helping me refine the blends. She's the one who got me into this in the first place. We've been researching this for years. You just never noticed. My stomach dropped. Her sister was a nurse. Not licensed anymore, but still. The layers went deeper than I thought. I kept my composure. Can I ask something else? Of course, she said, smiling. That first lunch you brought to the station, what was in it? Oh, that one was mild. Just some liver tonic ginkgo powder and fermented barley water. Nothing dangerous, just enough to clear out your system. You were pale for a day or two, I remember, but that meant it was working. I nodded and pressed stop on my watch recording. That was all I needed. The next day, I called Detective Salgado, the same friend I'd reached out to earlier, and told him I was ready to report everything. I forwarded him the audio clips photos and food sample results. He didn't say much on the phone, just, "We'll handle this carefully." That afternoon, Carla showed up at the firehouse again. Lunch delivery. This time she brought the meal with a thermos and a card that said, "You're becoming who you're meant to be." I took the food with a smile and nodded, then texted Salgado, "She's here. Today's the day." Half an hour later, a cruiser pulled up quietly and parked down the street. Salgado entered through the back with an evidence officer. I met them in the briefing room, handed over the lunch, and walked them through the timeline. He said they'd make contact within 24 hours after confirming everything in the lab. Before he left, he looked me in the eye. This isn't just weird behavior, Ruiz. This is tampering with intent. We'll handle it. But you need to stay out of her way until we do. I nodded slowly, the weight of it all finally settling in my chest. Carla thought she was healing me, but tonight she'd find out what healing the truth really looks like. Carla was arrested the following evening. It happened quietly, almost anticlimactically. Detective Salgado and another officer showed up at our home just after 6 p.m. I had been instructed to stay elsewhere for the night, but I waited down the street in my truck. I watched from a distance as they approached the front door. She answered barefoot, wearing one of her herbal retreat robes. Her hands were covered in something green, probably from blending another tonic. When Salgado introduced himself and explained why they were there, she looked confused, genuinely confused, as if the idea that what she'd done might be criminal had never occurred to her. He later told me that when she heard the words food tampering and reckless endangerment, she shook her head and said, "No, you don't understand. I was healing him. He needed this." They took her in without a struggle, no yelling, no handcuffs in the street. Just silence, a slight breeze, and the sound of my front door clicking shut behind her. The days that followed were a mix of legal briefing statements and waiting. The lab confirmed what we already suspected. The most recent lunch Carla had delivered contained high bacterial contamination combined with dangerous concentrations of iron powder, digestive stimulants, and other unregulated herbs. The food wasn't spoiled by accident. It had been prepared deliberately with the intent to cause stress to the body under the guise of natural healing. The assistant district attorney moved quickly. Carla was formally charged with 3 counts reckless endangerment food, tampering with intent to harm, and unlawful administration of a substance without consent. They added a recommendation for mandatory psychological evaluation, citing the recorded audio where she described her actions as part of a systemic plan to reprogram Daniel's biology. In court, Carla's appearance stunned me. She looked thinner, paler. Not because of confinement, but because without the performance, the herbs the house to control, she didn't know who to be. Her lawyer argued that her actions came from a place of love, that she sincerely believed she was helping me, that no long-term physical damage had occurred. But the recordings, the lab tests, the sheer premeditation in her voice, They painted a different picture. I sat in the courtroom silent, surrounded by people who used to be strangers now, watching my private pain play out in legal language. Carla's sister testified reluctantly that they had discussed food-based immunity theory, but claimed she never knew Carla had taken it this far. Whether she was lying or just distancing herself, I couldn't tell. What mattered was that the court heard everything. The judge listened carefully as the prosecution played a segment of one audio clip, Carla explaining how she had been testing my reactions over time. How she avoided telling me because he would have refused if he knew. How she smiled while describing the healing crisis she wanted to trigger. In the end, the judge sentenced her to 2 years of supervised probation, 300 hours of community service, and mandatory weekly psychological treatment. She was barred from contacting me for at least 5 years under a court-issued restraining order. And while some people may think she got off easy for me, the real sentence was this: she lost access. She lost trust. She lost me. I filed for divorce the morning after the sentencing. She didn't contest it. There was nothing left to defend. At the station, my crew had my back. A few of them admitted they'd noticed I looked run down for months, losing weight, looking pale, but they'd assumed it was job stress. One guy pulled me aside and said, "Man, we thought you were just burning out. We had no idea." Neither did I. Not fully. Not until it was almost too late. Captain Moreno gave me a week off with pay. He said, "Go rest." Whatever this was, it wasn't just weird, it was war. I took his advice. I shut off my phone, stayed in a hotel downtown for 3 nights, and walked aimlessly through the city like I was learning how to breathe again, because I was. I had escaped something I didn't even have a name for. Something invisible. And now, with the truth on the record and the door to that house finally closed behind me, I could begin to reclaim the life she tried to reshape, not for my health, but for her control. 6 months after the sentencing, I finally felt air in my lungs again. Not just oxygen, but peace. The kind of calm that only comes when you've escaped something you didn't even know was suffocating you. I moved out of the house we once shared and into a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, and mine. The fridge held food I cooked myself. Real food? Simple meals that didn't come with herbs I couldn't pronounce or sauces that smelled like vinegar and rot. For the first time in over a year, I could eat without bracing for the aftermath. Healing wasn't instant. It was slow, filled with questions like, how didn't I see it sooner? Or why did I stay silent for so long? But my therapist reminded me that when abuse wears the mask of love, even smart people miss the signs, especially when it happens in your own kitchen. I began volunteering at a local food pantry on weekends. Something about offering people safe, nourishing meals helped me restore my own trust in food and in people. I don't see Carla anymore, and I don't hate her. I simply recognize her now for what she became. Not a partner, not a healer, but a warning I carry with quiet strength. What happened to Daniel is more common than most people realize. As a trauma counselor who's worked with both male and female survivors, I can tell you abuse doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it's hidden behind routines, disguised as help, justified as love. Carla's actions were calculated but not violent in the traditional sense. That's what makes it dangerous. We call this coercive control, a pattern where one partner takes away another's autonomy through subtle manipulation, disguised concern, and domination masked as care. When someone alters what you eat, isolates you from others, or dismisses your instincts, they're not protecting you. They're conditioning you. This case is a wake-up call. Abuse doesn't have to be loud to be lethal. If you've ever ignored your gut because the person smiling at you seemed too loving to doubt, you're not alone. Listen to your discomfort. Track the patterns. Speak up, especially when silence feels safer. And if this story moved you, take a moment to leave a comment like, "This made me rethink everything." You never know who's reading and needs the courage to act. For more stories that reveal truth and protect those who stay quiet too long, subscribe. Quiet strength saves lives. So does awareness.